There we go, and over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so let me share my screen. This is the first opportunity for everything to go wrong, isn't it? But it should work. So if how's that?
Yeah, can see that.
Perfect. Okay, is it big enough on the screen? It's huge on my screen, so I can't see anyone else now. But as long as you guys can see it, that's good.
We just can't, we can see the side slides as well. So it might need to go, you go into, I
Okay.
think, slideshow and then from first slide or something.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll click off that. No, that's no good. Let's see. Oh, maybe I can just close this down. Well, I guess,
It's,
I
it's
guess.
does anybody have any problem seeing that? That is it too small? Is everybody okay with it as it is?
I can
Ah,
see
that's
that.
better.
There we go.
Is that better? Okay. All I've done is switch screens, so that's interesting. Now I can see you on one screen. But anyway, well, there's not many in the call. So actually, I mean, I was planning to leave time at the end for questions, but to be honest, just interrupt me. I might not see hands go up, so you're better off just speaking over me if you have a question going through. But also I can answer questions at the end as well.
If you want to go busy, 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 busy.
So just a bit of background on me, first of all, just so that I'm very transparent about who I am and what I'm offering. DOAN Energy actually is just the brand name under which I'm operating as an individual now. I do bring people into that for specific projects, but in terms of what DOAN Energy is, it's basically just me on a full-time basis. I've got up until 2019, up until COVID, effectively had 20 years in a variety of positions, financial originally. So I'm a chartered accountant by training, but then in general management and across various sectors as well. But in 2019, I took over a company called DOAN Energy, which was a gas producer in North Yorkshire. They had their own deep gas wells and a pipeline and a generating station. So they were then selling electricity directly into the grid. I was brought in to develop that and actually to produce more gas, but there were all sorts of reasons why that wasn't viable. And so I basically shut the gas business down. We stopped producing gas from the wells. We mothballed the pipeline, and we ended up selling the generating station. And then really the challenge was to pivot that company into something else rather than just have to abandon the assets and put them back to farmers' fields, for instance. I wanted to try and repurpose them. And the problem with the gas wells was they weren't producing enough gas. They were producing too much hot water. So it didn't take long to think, well, if these wells are producing too much hot water, then can we use them for geothermal energy? So I can't claim to be a genius. I can't claim to have come from this from a climate activist point of view. I came from this purely from a pragmatic, asset repurposing viewpoint, that I was in a business that had some assets and we needed to find a way to repurpose them. Over the next few years, did a whole bunch of feasibility into whether these could be repurposed. We then merged the assets of that company into Energy, which is a geothermal developer, and started to develop community energy projects in North Yorkshire. Now, most recently, what I've done is I've exited from Energy for one reason, really, which was I started working with community groups, mainly in North Yorkshire, which is where DOAN Energy had the assets. And as I started to work with them, they wanted to incorporate other technologies. So they wanted to look at wind turbines, for instance, or more commonly solar arrays. And of course, I was working for Energy, which was a geothermal company. So I couldn't really advise them on other technologies. So I decided to exit from Seraphy. I still have good contacts with them and actually use them in a lot of projects. But it means that now I can help community energy groups with solar, wind turbines, hydropower, in addition to geothermal for heat networks, and also air source heat pumps, which are becoming more and more common for projects. The other reason to exit was all of my projects were in North Yorkshire. That's where Third Energy was originally based, and I live in Sevenoaks in Kent, so it wasn't ideal. I mean, I love traveling up to North Yorkshire, and there's lots of opportunity there, but I wanted to develop more projects in Kent, so that's the most recent change. And in terms of what I do is really, project origination is to help people build out some initial ideas they have about community energy projects, especially heat networks, helping them get grant applications in and raising the money to do feasibility work and development work, engaging the community for that, and then managing those projects. So really, that's what I've been doing for a couple of years, and now doing on a full-time basis. So I think we'll come to a more broader list of technologies later on, but the main reason for this presentation was to talk about the potential for ground source or geothermal, and in particular closed loop geothermal. So it's worth just running through the different types of geothermal that there are. There is shallow borehole technologies, which you can see on the diagram on the right there. Quite a lot of people do this in their back garden. They go down perhaps up to 6 or 7 feet and run some pipes, and quite often that's enough to give them some underfloor heating in the home. So that is becoming more common. You don't need a particularly big temperature differential to do that. I mean, air source heat pumps work off of quite small temperature differentials to create heat, and so you can do the same thing with quite shallow boreholes. But more commonly now, people are drilling to 50 meters or 100 meters. There's several hospital projects in the UK actually where they're putting, in some cases, up to 100 50 or 100 meter boreholes into the ground to heat the hospital. So that is a viable technology, and it's beginning to become more common. There's then more conventional geothermal. Now, some people would argue that shallow borehole technology isn't really geothermal because it's actually solar power. It's the sun. The heat from the sun is actually seeping into the ground, and you're just taking that heat back out of the ground. But as soon as you go beyond 50 to 100 meters, you're getting into geothermal heat, which is basically heat from the center of the earth. Now, traditional geothermal requires 2 wells, so that's the diagram in the middle there, and typically you go down to about 5 kilometers to get to the really hot rocks. They're doing this in Cornwall, and it's very common in places like Iceland and Norway. But you pump water down one hole, you then allow that water to go through the rocks, and then you bring it up another pipe, and you can get very high temperatures from that, high enough to create power, basically. So when it comes to the surface, it's actually steam, and then you can generate electricity from it. There's a couple of problems with that in the UK. The first one is that you have to go very deep. There's not many places it would work. So Cornwall is one of the few places where there's sufficient heat at that depth to do it. The other issue is fracking, because it might not be called fracking, but for sure you have to stimulate the rock. You have to put water through that rock at high pressure to get to make the ends of the 2 wells meet. And so that's a bit of an issue in this country. The other thing is just the risk of drilling. So you have to basically target either a fractured rock, or you have to target an aquifer. And despite improvements in technologies over decades of oil and gas exploration, it's still actually quite difficult to hit the target. We might know there's an aquifer under the ground because there's a spring, or we just know it's there from previous drilling records. But accurately getting a well into that aquifer is actually quite difficult. And at the Eden project in Cornwall, they spent I think probably about 20 million drilling a well to hit an aquifer, and they missed. So they now have a well that is producing heat, but it's nowhere near producing what they expected it to because they just couldn't find the aquifer. So there's huge drilling risk with that. The third option is a deep well, so perhaps not as deep as the conventional geothermal, but certainly down to sort of between 500 and 1500 meters. But it's closed loop. So by that I mean we drill down into the rock, but then it's a sealed well. We're not actually pushing water or taking water out of the rocks itself. All we're doing is circulating water within the well. Now, the downside of that is you don't get the higher temperatures that you get from traditional geothermal, but you still can get temperatures of between 20 and 40 degrees, which is not enough for power generation, but it's certainly enough for heat networks and for space heating. So that's becoming a much more viable technology in the UK. It's done around the world. It just hasn't been done in the UK that much. But again, just to be clear, there's no interaction with the subsurface geology. So therefore, there's no fracking required. You're not targeting an aquifer, so you don't carry the drilling risks. And perhaps importantly, because it's a closed system and you put the water in and you just keep that water circulating, there's no Environment Agency issues. You don't require any permits for it. So it's much easier from a planning point of view as well. In terms of potential in the UK, on average in the UK, if you go down a kilometre, then the depth at the bottom will be 30 degrees. And if you go down another kilometre, you'll get another 30 degrees. So if you can get to 2 kilometres, it'll be on average 60 degrees C at the bottom. But there are parts of the country where it's hotter for various geological reasons. So you'll see on that map on the right hand side that this is a mapping of temperatures at 1 kilometre, and where I have been working in North Yorkshire, just through complete luck, it's a bit of a hotspot at that depth. But there's also plenty of sort of warm areas in the southeast as well, as you'll see there. But even the sort of the cooler areas there, you're still looking at places at a kilometre. You can get 34 or 38 degrees at that depth. So the whole point of this is you target that depth, you circulate water, and you bring some of that heat to the surface. That's the way this works. We've tested it in North Yorkshire on one of the old gas wells that we had. So that picture on the left there, that's basically an old gas well, what we call a Christmas tree on top, the red valves. And all we've done is we've attached a cold pipe and a hot pipe. So we are pushing cold water down a central tube down to a depth of about just over 2 kilometers. And then we're allowing that water to heat up and then come up the outside of that tube. So it's 2 concentric pipes, but a closed loop system. And in doing that, we've been operating that for about 2 years now. And the temperatures at our bottom are about 70 degrees, and we can bring it to the surface at 42 degrees. And that's without any insulation. It was just plastic piping that we used. So that, that 42 degrees, if we started using that water at the surface, and then recycling it down the well, then that temperature would drop. You'd get to a point where it would equalize at a lower temperature. But as we said before, if you can get 20 degrees, or in fact anywhere between 10 degrees and 20 degrees, is very viable heat for any kind of space heating, and you can use a heat pump to boost it. So to be able to harvest at 42 degrees gives you more than enough heat to use at the surface. So the technology has been tested. It works in the UK. It was tested in a particular hotspot, as that map shows, but there's no reason why it can't work in the southeast as well. So I just wanted to run through some case studies, because I think the technology is one thing, but I think it's worth running through case studies because there are certain characteristics to certain cases that feasibility work that we've done that suggest what ideal projects should have. And so it's worth running through so that in each of your areas you can think, okay, well, you might have a community group, or you might have some public buildings that you need to find a heat solution for, and you need to know whether this will be viable for that. And so we can do that with some case studies. Not surprisingly, most of my case studies are from North Yorkshire. That's where we've actually done funded feasibility, but I do have one from Kent later on that I'll come on to. So the first one is the town of Pickering. In North Yorkshire, we got a grant from the Shared Prosperity Fund, and I helped Pickering Town Community Interest Company get that grant. And that was originally for 2 hubs. So we looked at a north hub in the north of the town, which was where there were 3 schools, a comprehensive school and 2 primary schools in close proximity to each other. And then we looked at a southern hub, which was actually closer to the sort of high street in the centre of town, but importantly had a community swimming pool and leisure centre there. So we did some network analysis. We for the south hub originally we're going to use an existing gas well. So we looked at putting a network in place for that, and that you can see that on the left-hand map. How we were planning to bring the pipe from the well to the swimming pool. And on the right hand is the North Hub, which is the advantage there is we could choose to drill a well right next to the schools and then put a network in. But really the economic modeling was interesting because it showed that for the North Hub, the capital cost will be about just over 1.1 million. That included the new well plus all the piping and the network and the heat pumps that the schools would need and some solar. So what we were finding in all of these cases is you can make the projects much more viable if you can produce some of your own electricity rather than be paying from electricity from the grid. So we built into all of these projects solar in place that would run the heat pumps. But for that 1.1 million, the first year energy costs across the schools would be about 68,000, and carbon emissions reduced by 165 tons equivalent per year. So that was shown a payback of about 14 years, which I think for private investors, 14 years is a bit long, but for public buildings, I actually think that's a pretty good return. As long as you're expecting those public buildings to be in place for that period of time or beyond. For the South Hub, the conversion of the existing gas well, we kind of assumed going into it that the returns might be better because we already had the well. But of course, the problem is that the well is not in the ideal location. It's not really where you would choose to put it. So for that, the capex ended up being much higher, 1.7 million. But a lot of that was the actual putting the network in to connect the existing well to the swimming pool. Interestingly, similar cost savings, about 65,000 a year, a higher saving in carbon, and that's largely because swimming pools just have a crazy high heat demand, and a lot of swimming pools are struggling with their energy costs because of that. But because of the additional capex, so the payback period was 20 years. So what's interesting, we've now gone back and I've helped the CIC raise a second grant. So we've now got development funding of just under 200,000 from the combined authority in York and North Yorkshire, and that's to actually look at a brand new well, so similar to the well we designed for the North Hub, but putting that right next to the swimming pool. And that project will actually go through planning as well. So we'll get all the way up to planning application, and we expect a new well next to the swimming pool to also be able to provide heat to nearby businesses. And there's a community theatre and a few high street businesses that could hook into that network. So it's a good case study because I think it shows that we can definitely put residential properties onto these networks, but you need an anchor off taker. So you need a swimming pool, or you need schools, Swimming pools are good because they require heat pretty much all the time, even when they're closed during the evening and during the night. You've still got to keep it at a reasonable temperature, because otherwise you're just going to spend a lot more energy in the morning trying to heat it back up again. So it's a constant heat requirement. Schools are great because schools need heat during the day, especially in the winter, of course. And that's not when most residential properties need it. So if you can hook up residential properties and schools to a network, then the schools will take the heat during the day, and then you switch it during the evening so that the residential properties do. So good anchor off takers for networks. A second study we did was actually targeting a residential settlement. So it's a village. Again, this was an existing gas well, but the difference here is the gas well's much closer to the village. Another Shared Prosperity Fund grant that we managed to secure. There are 3 wells on that site, and combined, those wells are more than capable of providing heat to the whole village. It would save about 290 tons of carbon per year, so significant saving. But again, one of the key things here was that this village lies right next to a big theme park, Flamingo Land. And while a theme park isn't a great heat requirement, they have a hotel and an office block, and both of those act as really good anchor off takers. And again, the hotel has an outdoor swimming pool. So again, that's something that even in the summer in North Yorkshire, it needs to be heated. So again, this works. We've just secured a grant of just under £1 million from the Merrill Fund up there to actually develop the first phase and put the pipes in the ground. So this can work in rural areas, but you're still looking, I think, for that main off taker, that the heat demand, a hotel, business, something like that. And then once you've justified, or you've got the economic justification for the network, then you can add residential properties on afterwards. And I should add that the QR codes that are on these pages are the feasibility reports. So when you get the presentation online afterwards, you can use those QR codes to take you straight to the feasibility reports that we did. So I just wanted to give you another one that we've just applied for a grant for. So we haven't got the funding yet, but it's an interesting one because this is a small village. It's about 70 residential properties. They've got the normal stuff you'd expect in a rural village: church, village hall, and a pub. But that's pretty much it. There aren't any obvious anchor off takers there. So what we've started to look at there is shallower networks. So we put in 50 to 100 meter wells. We would also couple that with solar panels on the public buildings. So the village hall, the church as well, which is becoming much more and more common now, put in panels onto churches and cathedrals. And also looking at hydropower here. So there is a river that runs through the village that actually is a fairly constant and strong current during the winter. So when the heat is needed the most, they should be able to generate quite a lot of power. And the reason I wanted to put this in is because quite often I think heat networks really are only viable in these kind of situations when you're coupling it with other technologies. So you're putting the solar power in to make the electricity cheaper, and it's on site. You are wind is an obvious thing. So sticking a big wind turbine up would solve that problem as well. But this is in a conservation area, so there's no way we get away with that. So it's looking at hydropower, it's looking at solar, it's looking at battery storage to make sure that we can not only generate electricity but store it for use at other times of the day, and then using that to run the heat network from ground source heat. So as I say, we're waiting for the grant on that one, but I do think it suggests that this is viable without big off takers if it's complemented by other renewable technologies. Just a quick one on a Kent case study. So we did some initial feasibility work for quite a large new housing development in East Kent. The capex cost, so the cost of actually drilling the wells, and it was multiple wells for this this development, came out about 3.75 million, but that was representing a cost saving of about 340,000 compared to the air source heat pumps that they were going to put in. So it's actually an 11-year payback on investment. So I think it shows that when you have a new development, you know, you're actually, you have the opportunity to put a network in as that development's being built. So it's much easier. You've got stuff on site where you can, you know, help put the trenching in and put the piping in. But against air source heat pumps, you can get a significant saving. The system would have had 0 scope 1 emissions. It would have reduced scope 2 emissions versus the air source heat pump. And that's largely because the air source heat pumps were going to be pulling power from the grid, which is not entirely renewable yet, and it won't be for many years. So those scope 2 emissions were still going to be there, whereas we were able to reduce that because we were using heat on site, which means you know, you use less power to raise the heat using heat pumps. But we also again incorporated some solar into that project to run the heat pumps. The modelling assumed about 45 degrees, 1,500 meters, but you know, you saw the map earlier that it's a bit of a hotspot in certain parts of Kent, so we actually expect that there'll be a much higher temperature at 1,500 meters, and so it'll probably be you know, hotter than we expect, which means that it might be possible to avoid drilling the final well. You know, so that's the advantage of this. If you have a multi-well project, as you drill the wells, you can see what the temperature is at the bottom, and it means that the capex cost is a maximum cost because you might be able to reduce that. So so that's just a few case studies to give you a flavour of where this kind of technology might work. And then I've put a slide in on funding options because I think, especially with this audience, you know, there's not a lot of money available for projects. Local council budgets are being cut. However, there are funds centrally. You know, the central government is pushing money into funds, and there are funds from other sources available. And you know, I thought it was worth just running through some of those. So one thing that came out in the budget yesterday is that there is, not only is the government standing behind its commitment to put money into sort of the warm homes plan and into GB Energy, it's actually increasing that commitment. So there's going to be more money going into it than was previously thought. The central government is keeping hydrogen and nuclear power close to its chest, which is, you know, that makes sense. That's very large capex projects, but they're very keen to push community energy. I think for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is, of course, if it goes wrong, it's not on them. It's the community itself that is running projects, and so it's a win-win for politicians because it looks as if they are helping communities develop. But if it goes wrong, then it's the community's fault, not theirs. So I think that might be partly behind the policy, but it's also a practical thing. Very difficult for central government to actually have the local presence and the local knowledge to get these community energy projects off the ground. So what they're doing is they're pushing it into funds and allowing regional bodies such as the net zero hubs to put that money out there and give that money to community groups. So it's a really good time in the sector. It's a good time to be a community group. I think where local authorities come into that is they can help support those community groups and actually raise money themselves to allocate funds into decarbonising public buildings as well. So, for instance, the GB Energy Community Fund at the top there, the first one, town and parish councils are eligible for that fund. So you don't have to be a community group to get money from that. That one, the last round on that closed about 2-3 weeks ago, but expected to reopen again in early 2026. Two types of grants available. One is for early feasibility, and you can get up to 40,000 for that. But then you can get a stage 2 grant to develop projects, which can be up to 100,000. And that's really to get detailed engineering done or to get planning consent, that kind of thing. So that doesn't cover capex costs, but it certainly covers feasibility and getting it to shovel ready stage, basically. There's also the Ofgem energy redress scheme, though. So this one's interesting. So whenever a electricity or a utility operator screws up, if they do something wrong and they have to pay penalties and fines, Ofgem put that into a pot, and then that pot is used to allocate money to community projects. And one of the aims of that is to help with the installation of renewable energy assets. So that's another scheme that groups can apply into. The Energy Efficiency Share Match Fund. This one is specifically for community benefit societies, which is just a form of legal entity. But again, that's for a whole host of green measures, solar panels, heat pumps, insulation, etc. And as I mentioned, yesterday's budget, there was an additional amount of money made available for energy efficiency of domestic properties, and that's going to be done through the Warm Homes Plan, for which the details we're still waiting for. It's coming out shortly, but for sure the net zero hubs will be supporting that. And for us, it's the Greater Southeast Net Zero Hub that is available to help us in this region, get that money and allocate it to projects. The Greater Southeast Net Zero Hub covers a huge area, actually. It covers right up into the Midlands, right up into Suffolk, the whole of London. And the downside of that is, of course, London gets far too much attention than it deserves. But I think the Net Zero Hub is very keen to support projects in the regions. The East Sussex and Hampshire have done particularly well on that. They've got quite a lot of quite mature community groups that already have solar farms in place. They've got solar on schools, community buildings, and but Kent has lagged behind a bit, and I still don't really understand the reason for that. But there seems to be a bit of a gap there where it just hasn't got the same level of funding as other regions have got. So that's something that we can put right. But the Net Zero Hub is available for advice on that. They're government funded, but they're there to actually support local authorities and community groups. So they're a really good source of funding or funding advice. But also there are other operators out there. So Community Energy Pathways, for instance, they're based in East Sussex, in Lewes in East Sussex. They've had a lot of success in actually just supporting community energy groups, supporting local authorities to basically to build capacity to get energy projects underway. One of their most recent projects they had was basically supporting a group of authorities in Lincolnshire, I think through the Lincolnshire County Council. Now the County Council paid Community Energy Pathways just over 100,000, I think it was, for them to do a capacity review, to do community engagement, etc., a whole bunch of work streams. So a lot of money, but what that enabled Lincolnshire to do was basically multiply that by 4 in terms of income, in terms of grants and other things. So they've actually got the best part of £500,000 in, which is grants for specific projects. It's grants for decarbonisation of public buildings. So there are, not only is there the possibility of getting stuff grant funded, which is basically just filling out an application form and getting the grant, so it's fairly free. There are people out there that are willing to do paid work for local authorities, but in a way that brings a lot more value back into the council. and other community groups. So I've squeezed a lot onto that page. There's a whole bunch of other funds I could have done, I could have put on, but it really comes down to individual ideas and concepts, right? So if it's purely focused on public sector buildings, the public sector decarbonisation fund is now gone, unfortunately. But there are other things there that can replace that, and the government has promised that there will be a precise scheme to replace that. But even before that, there are other ways of getting that done. But also community groups. If in your authorities you are supporting community groups, then there's a huge range of funds available to sort of put applications into for these kind of projects. So a little plug page on the end for what I do, which is basically just helping community groups, get their energy projects off the ground. Also trying to work with local government organisations to help as well. So at the moment, I sit on I'm co-chairing the Kent Sustainable Communities Network with people from KCC, which again is we're sort of just hosting a whole bunch of community groups and trying to help them develop their projects effectively. That's really what I'm trying to do, and I've hopefully left enough time. So that's 20 minutes where happy to answer any questions or any clarifications anyone has.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Sarah Barker.
Yes, the late one. Russell, I presume that's your first name?
Yes, that's right.
Very interesting. It's brought together a few interesting points there. Just to throw something in the mix. My parish council is within the Tunbridge and Malling area, and until recently we've had a dedicated climate change and environment committee. I hope that will return at some point. But there is an interesting project between Shibburn and Plaxtol in TNM. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I do. They've got a community energy fund grant.
They have 40,000, but not a lot seems to be, and that's been run by a very energetic lady called Jennifer Bate. I think this has got potential, but the main thing I see of this is that Jennifer and others from the community that set this up, they worked very hard to try and get people interesting. The first launch they had was, I can't remember the exact date, but I think we had a full hall in Plaxtol, must be 70 to 80 people. Then they had another event. So I think it's a matter of energizing communities, especially those that are off grid, like all the villages. They rely on oil, they've got no gas. And I'll speak to Charmaine about this, but I'm not sure if you're aware that throughout Kent there are area committees. Now, obviously, today is the big day that the unitary bids go in, or suggestions. So we will know by the 16th of July next year whether Kent is if Kent is going anyway but loose, or whatever the saying is. So once we know, then that's going to be a much wider problem. But I think, personally, I would like you to come along at some point, if Charmaine can give me some guidance on this, to come and speak to the Tunbridge and Malling Area Committee, just to press it out there, because there's a lot of people that don't know about it. So it's sort of clustered around places like Borough Green, Platt. They were all interested, but it seems to have gone flat. There's nothing. And we've all got to wake up. I know the subsidy is what we were paying on our energy bills has been removed in the budget. And I have a personal opinion about that, which I won't go into. But, I think we're sleepwalking at the moment. Definitely sleepwalking. And there are so many. I mean, take it for the local plan is going through now for Tunbridge and Morling, and I also believe Sevenoaks.
Yes, it
Now,
is. Yeah.
all those house builders should be thinking about your projects for the
Hmm.
future. We cannot go on like this.
Hmm.
So if I liaise with Charmaine about coming along, we have a Teams meeting 3 times a year. So, perhaps alter your, just to hammer home also, I'm sure I could get Jenny or somebody else to say what they're actually doing now. Last I heard was they hadn't got their grant.
Yeah, no, I heard that as well, and I was worried about that because
Yes.
they should have had it. I think they
They
got it
should have had it
awarded.
by now. Yes,
Yeah,
I will contact Jenny because
yeah.
I haven't spoken to her for quite some months.
Hmm.
Um,
I have to admit, so I was aware of the project they've got, which is to look at energy efficiency solutions in a
that's it. That's
yeah,
it.
in
Yeah.
several homes. I think they asked for volunteers and they picked a dozen or so.
Yeah.
I then owe them a follow-up because I said to them, well, I could come along and look at a follow-on project for a heat network to see whether that
Yeah.
was viable.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
just haven't made that phone call yet. But yeah, she did. I think last time I heard her, because she's part of the Sustainable Communities Network, and I think it's about 2 months ago we had a call and she said they hadn't received the money yet, but I don't know what it was, whether it's a technical issue or sometimes it's just getting the grant agreement finalized, which can take a while. But
Okay.
so I could follow up with her as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
happy to come along to present
I think
to
we'd have
everyone.
to
Yeah.
perhaps change it slightly, but I
Hmm.
will put a note down to contact Jenny now, and I'm obviously interested. Did the East Kent with the house builder go anywhere?
So it's still ongoing. It's a
Yeah.
big. I didn't put the town in because when I that slide originally came from when I was working at Seraphie and I was under an NDA. Interestingly, I'm not under that NDA anymore.
Ah.
And actually the report has gone public. So it's actually Faversham is where it's going to be built. It's a multi-phase development just off of the M2 that goes
Oh,
past.
that's why Louise is here.
Hmm. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so as far I'm not aware of the where they are on that because that was a project that I did when I was at Seraphie, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were certainly keen. I guess one of the issues with this is because even though it's not a new technology, ground source and geothermal is used all over the world, it's still quite new to people in the UK, and so
Yeah.
there's still a little bit of caution. But I think what they were thinking for the Faversham development was they can start putting in air source heat pumps as a backup, but also put in a geothermal well at the beginning. And once, because it's a multi-phase development, they can try it in phase one.
Yeah.
And once
Yeah.
they've tested it, then they could roll it out on the other phases. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's where they were heading with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm very interested in this, and I'm chair of the local T&M area committee, so I will be trying to push this. We Tunbridge and Morling have also got a climate action forum, but that's the
Hmm.
council, and we've got a new climate change officer in Tunbridge and Morling,
Hmm.
so watch this space, I think, and.
Yeah, no problem. Just get in touch
Certainly
and
with
yeah,
the unitaries, it's going to be. I think I'm going to have a betting board up on my wall, so see how things go.
yeah,
Okay, I won't hog the place. So thank you for that, Russell, and apologies again for being tardy in joining.
no problem.
Do you have any other questions? No, I think it's one of those ones we'll probably go away and get the questions after. So email them into me, and I can send them on to Russell if you do think of anything after. I think
Actually, I've just got a quick question. The project you mentioned just now in East Kent, what volume of actual properties was that? I know it's diverse, but the actual
Yeah, it was in the
home
hundreds.
side.
It was in the hundreds. I've got a feeling the whole project was, I think, all phases was into might have been 1,500 homes, including a new school and commercial units as well. I think phase one, not surprisingly, phase one was all residential.
Mhm.
I suspect all residential with no social housing. And then they were going to build the phases on. But it was it's actually land owned by the Duchy of Cornwall. So it was the Duchy of Cornwall that were basically trying to get the project going. I'm not sure what stage of planning it's in. I think there's been an initial consultation, I think, and I'm not sure they've gone through final planning yet. But it was, and that's part of the reason why it was viable, because you've got such a large volume of properties, and you've got the opportunity to design the system bespoke. Basically, you're not trying to plug a network into something that already exists. So, but yeah, I don't know any more details on that at the moment, unfortunately.
Okay. No, I think that gives me vague, the approximate size of volume
Yep.
for what you're getting out. Thank you.
It's interesting, the comment, I think, Sarah, you made about off-grid villages and oil. I mean, community engagement is tough. Of all of the things I've done on these projects, the toughest thing has been in community engagement. I think you have, in all of these villages, you have a small number of people who are very engaged, and they're not the problem. Sadly for them, they've normally already done quite a lot. So they put solar panels on, they put an air source heat pump in. So they are going to benefit the least from a village-wide project. But engaging everyone else is really tough. And people that have been using oil are very happy using oil. They're independent, they're on their own. When there's a power cut elsewhere, they don't get affected because they still got their heat. They can run a generator. And so to try, and even though it's a village system, so what you're saying, well, we're not reliant on a grid, we're just going to do it locally. You're still asking people to give up that independence and that what they perceive as being control, for something that, yes, is more renewable, but there's a massive fear factor in that.
Yeah.
So,
To quote a councillor from one of the Tonbridge and Malling parish councils, he's very much into climate alternative energy, and he just said all my councillors have just got their head in the sands, and I think he's absolutely right. But at some point it's going to hit home. I may well have gone by then. I'm getting older, and it's the youngsters that I got a feeling for, but it's that middle bracket now of sort of 30s to 50s, well, even to 60s. It's quite a wide bracket. They've got to realize they've got to realize that transport, heating, etc., is going to be changed, but there is a block there, and for the life of me, I don't know what it is.
And I think I'm beginning to talk far less about climate change and renewables, and talk much more about saving costs. Because I mean, what's interesting is, in KCC, especially with a reform council now, they are all very fearful of what's going to happen with climate change officer positions and that kind of thing. But I've said to them, actually, if you can talk much more about cost of living, you lower energy bills if you do this. If you can talk more about resilience, energy resilience. At the moment, most of the southeast, really, yes, we've got plenty of power generation in the southeast, but we're also reliant on interconnectors with France. There's huge amounts of energy coming through from French nuclear power stations. It only takes an accident there or a problem with the interconnector, and suddenly we're having power outages. So it's more about energy resilience. I think if you can get things off the grid and get it local. The fact that it's renewable and it's good for the climate is just a nice benefit, But I think those are policies that that reform can get on side with, So it doesn't have to be about climate change and sustainability. It can be resilience and costs.
Interesting there, a hook there, Charmaine, because we've got a climate change advisory committee. I think we need to, I think it's the first time I've heard resilience outside our discussions. So perhaps I'm beginning to be turned, as they say, about naming it, because thank you, Russell, you've given me a different perspective. I was very much against resilience in the name, but I think now I really hadn't thought of it in that term, because we've got Kent Resilience Forum, which again, they're not doing a lot with the cost saving and all that.
Hmm.
You know, it's going to affect them in years to come anyway. Kent Fire and Rescue.
Yep.
You know, where do they get their water from? It'll all have to be pumped to various parts of Kent and desalinated because there won't be enough water in the reservoirs. I mean, Kings Hill is down for getting 12, well, and the next borough and the next parish for 1,200 more dwellings. You know, and that's just a drop in our 19,500 houses in the next 15 years. Where is all the water going to come from? Anyway, I mustn't divert onto that. That's another hot topic. I'll shut up now. If you get me going on.
I didn't mute her then. She muted herself. That was not me. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all for coming. I think it's there's a lot to take back to our Climate Change Advisory Committee, and I think there's a lot around keeping in contact and across the SCN, Russell, for when there's new grant application rounds, so that we can keep parishes. But this recording will be going on the website. I can circulate it via the email as well, so I know Katie was having issues getting the sound. But I think this is probably the start of a conversation rather than just a one-off. Amazing.
No,
have a lovely weekend.
Great. Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Russell. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Where's my leave button?